Thank you, Las Cian Corla. First of all, I'd like to welcome homeowners from Counties Clare, Limerick, Mayo, Sligo and Donegal who are here with us in the gallery today. And I want to commend all of them and all of the affected homeowners for their campaign, many of whom have been campaigning, as the Minister knows, for a decade, but in particular for the incredibly intense level of campaigning in the last 12 months on the streets, in social media, in engagement with the Minister and his officials, as well as with us in opposition. I have to say, however, listening very carefully to the Minister, it is clear that there is a growing gap between what the Minister is saying he is doing and what is actually in the bill and on offer to affected homeowners. In fact, many of us have been talking to those homeowners since the publication of the legislation over a week ago, and the emotions they are expressing to us are anger, are frustration, and a sense of being very, very badly let down. They, and I have to say we, are deeply unhappy with the rushed nature of the legislation. It has been greatly delayed, and when I raised this point with you, Minister, last week on the floor of this House, you said it hadn't been delayed. Well, in February, on the 10th, in the Select Committee, I asked you for an update on the legislation, and I have the minutes here, and you said directly, I hope to publish the general scheme in March. You went on to say that if we need amendments at committee stage, we can do that too. When I raised the March deadline with some of your officials, they were surprised because they were working to a deadline of the end of April. April then turned to May, May turned to the start of June, and here we are with a very, very important piece of legislation that every member of this House wants to get right in the best interests of the homeowners. And we are being given an inadequate amount of time to ensure it is correct. The accelerated scrutiny at committee was not ideal, but that was a gesture of good faith on behalf of many of us to show that we did not want to delay the process. But the idea that a bill of this size and complexity would get just 2 hours committee consideration next week is a scandal. The price tag, up to or maybe even exceeding €3 billion, 2 hours, Las Cian Corla, in my view, in fact, is negligent, if not reckless. In my considered view, and the view of many others, this bill is not right. Now, it will be very easy for the Minister to dismiss the views of myself, my colleagues, or others in the opposition. So what I want you to do, Minister, is listen very, very carefully to the words, not of other politicians, but of the homeowners themselves. First thing this morning, there was a joint statement from the Donegal Mica Action Group, the Mayo Pyrite Action Group, the Clare Pyrite Action Group, and the Limerick Action Group, and the Sligo Action Group. And I'm going to read their statement into the record of the Dáil, and I'm really urging you and your government colleagues to listen to what they have to say. We, the representatives of the homeowners across Donegal, Mayo, Clare, Limerick and Sligo, would like to issue the following joint statement regarding the defective block bill scheduled to be debated in the Dáil today. It is imperative that the voice of the homeowners, the victims of defective materials, is heard, and that in particular the government TDs, those individuals that we have voted into office, listen before it is too late. Listen, because to date you have not listened. We are angry, frustrated, and the endless torture will not be tolerated to go on 1 minute further. Over the past 10 years, we have engaged endlessly with different government officials and government parties. We have entered talks, bringing with us our lived experience of this nightmare, arming each official with the practical solutions of what is needed on the ground to deliver a scheme that will rebuild our homes. At each stage, we have encountered obstacles. We have been delivered a scheme that was so flawed it proved financially unviable and practically unworkable to be of any use for impacted homeowners. Last summer, talks were entered into again with homeowner representatives from Mayo and Donegal. Other impacted counties, including Clare, Limerick, etc., were excluded from this process. Under government pretence of forming a joint working committee which would take on board homeowner input. The aim? A joint working effort that would design a scheme that truly provided the 100% redress that the full government supported on June 15, 2021. Sadly, this was not to be the case. Not because we homeowners did not engage, but because the Department of Housing officials and government officials wasted 3 months defending their already debunked 90-10 scheme. When the Minister of Housing announced the scheme in November, it showed, quote, lessons had not been learnt. Presented to the press was a Trojan horse that brought with it all the media spin the Department of Housing could throw at the public. Spin that said it was indeed 100%, when it is not. Spin around a figure of €420,000, which very few will ever get. Spin about the burden to taxpayers, when we are the very taxpayers who have been left to suffer in rotting homes built with unregulated blocks. Portraying us homeowners as greedy, as chancers. Their indifference for the people in homes built with defective blocks, quite evident through the scheme's many clauses and trappings. Not to be deterred or walk away, representatives again agreed to enter discussions with government representatives. Our aim, to try and improve the new scheme for a third time. All areas were reviewed and solutions provided to the additional problems created by the department. Solutions were presented for rental properties and holiday home inclusion, an increase on the maximum grant available, inclusion of foundations, the controversial damage threshold, to name just a few. Multiple weekly meetings over 6 months were held on the pretence of designing a scheme that would work. This bill was due to be different. This engagement would be different from past experience. We would work together to design a scheme that truly provided 100% redress, that the full government supported on June 5th, 2021. Last week we were due to see the fruits of our labour delivered, a workable scheme that would enable the thousands of homeowners across 13 counties to move forward with their lives. Instead, what was delivered over 60 pages was contempt for us homeowners. In the same week, the Housing Committee heard quarries are still producing defective materials. How can we be expected to trust a system which is not fit for purpose, failing in its responsibility to protect victims, citizens and the taxpayer? Threats of fines and imprisonment for innocent homeowners. Minister, nowhere mentioned were the equivalent fines or threats of imprisonment for the true perpetrators of this, the producers of these defective blocks, including giants of the Irish construction industry. We have scaled every obstacle put in our way, but it appears the government has strung us along for months. Practically every suggestion and solution presented ignored by the Department of Housing and housing agency officials. The voices and plight of ordinary homeowners treated with cynical contempt by those with the power to do better by us. Over the past week, and pressed to the wall, we have worked around the clock to put forward 80 amendments to make the scheme work. 80 amendments, because that are the number of failures in this bill. We, the homeowners, are calling on you, the elected TDs, to listen carefully to the amendments when they are put forward. They have come from insight and suffering over long years of those who know what it means to live in these homes. The new scheme will not work without these amendments. By ignoring us again today, you are wasting more money and destroying more lives. And while we wait on the Industry Standard 465 review, which we need to include all deleterious materials scientifically proven to be problematic, along with foundations, you, Minister, must assure for us, your electorate, these amendments are made. You must forget party politics and focus on what is best for your constituents, no matter what their political allegiance, and show the flexibility to be the change required to finally make this scheme work. To date, this government has broken all parliamentary processes while trying to rush the scheme through the statutory legislative changes. You have given us no time to review this bill, no time to debate this bill, no time to even communicate and discuss the consequences of the long-term aspects of the bill to the thousands of homeowners whose lives will be destroyed by not only defective blocks, but your failure to provide true redress for the problem. Minister, let us be very clear so our words as homeowners are not misunderstood. If this bill is not amended, we, the homeowners, will not support it. We will continue our campaign and protests until it is amended, until it is fit for purpose. Fit for the citizens of this country who need to avail of it to fix their homes. It is not just our houses that this is destroying, but our daily lives, our working lives, our family lives, our physical and mental well-being, the very fabric of our communities. Minister, we will not give up. The time for engagement is over. Amendments are needed. It's time that your government and its Department of Housing listen and deliver what has been promised. Signed by representatives, homeowners across the affected counties. Minister, they are not the words of a politician. They are not the words that can be dismissed as political opportunism. They are the words of individuals and families living in homes crumbling around their families. And I'm urging you to listen carefully to what we in the opposition have to say to ensure we get this bill correct. Homeowners are telling us that the legislation is not fit for purpose. They're telling us it is defective. They have drafted and asked deputies to submit over 80 amendments, and many of us have done that and more. And Minister, you need not only to listen to what they are saying, to consider their amendments and to improve this bill. I want to highlight a couple of key concerns without prejudice to the others that we will address next week. The first is this bill does not provide 100% redress for the vast majority of homeowners. Martina Hegarty from Mayo made an incredibly compelling case at committee. Many of the members here heard her. She lives in a very modest family home in Mayo, about 90 square metres. She estimates, on the basis of the information available today, she may get a grant of $169,000. But on the basis of the quotations she's been given today, and that's before we factor in inflation, the actual cost of full remediation and replacement as per the grant scheme could be as high as €200,000. She does not have the difference. There is real fear in Mayo and Clare particularly that the damage threshold, if it is based on the recommendations of the expert working group, will be particularly disadvantageous for those with pyrite because the nature of cracking and damage manifestation is different. If there is damage in a property, they should be in the scheme. The damage threshold should only be about prioritising when those homes get done, and I would urge you to consider that point carefully. I have to say the formula for calculating the cost is deeply flawed. Not only do we need updated Society of Chartered Surveyors of Ireland figures in advance of the opening of the scheme, specific to the counties and regions affected, but the terms of reference, which the SASI had no hand or part in producing, need to be reviewed so we get a 100% like-for-like replacement and not as what is currently on offer. And the proposal for addressing cost inflation, while welcome in terms of a 12-month review, are capped at 10%. And what happens if inflation is above that? Who picks up the tab under your scheme? The homeowner. The exclusion of foundations is contrary to the science, and I welcome what you've said about the National Standards Authority of Ireland work, but that has to be accelerated. We cannot have a long gap between the opening of the scheme and that outcome, and the same has to be said for the more substantive review by NSAI of Industry Standard 465, and we were informed by officials that that could be delayed until the latter end of next year. That could be 9 to 12 months before or after the scheme is opened, and that would not be acceptable. For me, one of the greatest omissions in the bill is the fact that the downsizing option includes a penalty. Go back to Martina Hegarty's case. If she can't afford the extra 40 or 50,000 euros to remediate and replace her home, surely she should be allowed to take the grant of 160 or 170,000 and within the footprint of her existing home, build a smaller home, up to 20% smaller perhaps than the current one, without any reduction in the grant. That was an incredibly generous compromise by the homeowners. We all expected something like that to be in the bill, and unfortunately, it's not here. There are also concerns that homeowners will be denied demolition and rebuild even when that is the right option, and that is a function of the mistrust that has developed between homeowners and the state. And again, I would urge the Minister to do everything to ensure that does not happen. The definition of relevant dwelling in the legislation is far too restrictive. Apartments are excluded, group homes, nursing homes and other properties, and nobody in this House disputes homes that have families living in them as owners or tenants, absolutely have to be the first priority. But I do not see why some mechanism, some pathway for the remediation of other forms of properties could not have been included in this scheme. I want to welcome the inclusion of social homes and the 2 pilots that we were told about in your officials with approved housing bodies in Donegal County Council. Please, though, do not allow these pilots to be slow and the subsequent rollout of remediation for all affected public homes to be delayed. Social housing tenants should not be left living in unsafe or crumbling buildings. And then the process involving the Council and the Housing Agency, as it is outlined in the bill, runs the risk of, on the one hand, being slow and overly bureaucratic, and we all know in this House the long delays currently underway in our local authorities because of understaffing. But also on a number of occasions, the timelines that have been given for applicants, for homeowners to respond, are very, very short compared to the more generous timelines for statutory agencies to do so, and that balance has to be particularly struck. Even I was surprised by the very large number of regulations that are going to be required by your officials. They have a very heavy burden of work to be doing between now and the end of the year. And my worry is, knowing how busy they are, and I have the greatest respect for the efforts they make in this regard, I do not see how all of those regulations will be drafted, approved by government and laid before the House by the end of this year. And I think it's important that government is as honest as it can be with people as to what the actual timelines are. Given the delays we've had to date, anticipating further delays is not unreasonable, and I think homeowners need to be told when this scheme will be open. So, Minister, what I would say to you is there is a lot of work to do on this bill between now and the end of the Dail term. We are committed to giving you as much time as you need and to making ourselves available as often as required to meet that deadline. In fact, the Select Committee, Minister, can meet as often as you need next week. We have discussed it and we have made ourselves available without in any way delaying the passage of the legislation by the recess. So I really am, Minister, urging you to work with us on this. The homeowners are urging you to work with them as well. And they have made it clear in their statement today, if the bill is not amended, they will not support it. I think of all of the lines in their statement, the profundity of what they have said to us as legislators cannot go unrespected. And I would urge you, please don't make the same mistakes as your predecessors. Please don't put in place a defective scheme that does not work. Do not prolong the misery and heartache for owners and tenants living in defective buildings. Let's get it right this time. The Business Committee met today. The Government Whip undertook to take back to Government a genuine, sincere request from many of us to give us more than 2 or 3 hours next week. There is no reason why our committee could not meet for 6 or 7 or 8 hours on Wednesday. We will do that, Minister. That will still allow you to complete report and remaining stages on Wednesday evening or Thursday morning to proceed to the Shannon. And again, I will repeat what I said before. Given the impact that this legislation will have on thousands of families, given the impact that this legislation will have on all taxpayers, given the huge sum of money that government is going to have to commit to undo the mistakes not only of industry but of light touch regulation in the past, the right thing to do is give us the time on Wednesday to go through the 80 homeowners' amendments, to adequately consider them, to listen to your response and indicate your willingness to take those away and introduce them as Shannon State amendments. And let's get this legislation right. It would be a travesty of the highest order, having left the families with 2 bad schemes, for a 3rd scheme to repeat all of those mistakes. So please, none of us are playing politics here. None of us are trying to create any difficulties. We want what the homeowners want, which is a piece of legislation and a remediation scheme that is right. The ball is in your hands, Minister. Work with us. Let's fix the bill. Let's pass the amendments. And let's give all of these homeowners and their neighbours the redress scheme that they rightly deserve and so desperately need. Thank you, Laskin Corla.